Hello, this is Jerry Alt. I'm here again, mixing it up a little bit. I've been doing tutorials primarily aimed at simple tricks and tips for photographers, but today I'm going to talk about the other side of the equation. I want to talk to the models out there as well as photographers and talk a little bit about the business of modeling. I intend to do an entire series of these talking about specifics: posing, wardrobe, makeup, applying to an agency, creating your comp cards, how to present yourself on social media, etc. But today I'm going to do a brief overview of what was a talk I gave at ClickCon 2019 and go through a couple of pretty standard things that you ought to understand if you're going to try to get into modeling. So who am I and why would you take advice from me? As you can see, I've been around for quite a while. I've been doing photography since I was 10 years old, but I got serious about light and technique, and I wanted to separate myself from other hobbyists back in 2008 after I returned from a trip to Australia. Many people wanted to buy my photos. To me, they just weren't as good as they should be. They certainly weren't National Geographic quality. And so I really started to focus on the aspects of my work that I thought needed help, and particularly with respect to lighting. So fast forward a little bit from that, within a year before 2009 came around, I had other photographers in Chicago referring to me as a fellow professional. And so at this point, I think I can safely say I've been working as a professional photographer for the past decade. My studio's in Evanston, Illinois. This is my second studio. I've been full-time studio photographer for 6 years now, going on 6 years. I do a variety of commercial, lifestyle, and event photography. A significant portion of my business is doing headshots, and along with that, helping models build their portfolios. So I've worked with well over 100 models. I don't really know. I did over 1,000 headshots last year, and a reasonable percentage of those were for models. So let's get into some of the things I want to talk about today. So these are some of what I call the legal considerations, but they're really business considerations. I should say that I am a licensed attorney and have been for about 40 years, but I'm not your lawyer, and this isn't intended to be giving you legal advice. I'm just bringing that experience in on the business side along with my experience with photography to give you a few tips. So I'm going to talk about first personal safety and setting limits. I think that's something that new models either don't understand or are unsure about, and you can get yourself in a bad situation with whoever your photographer is if you don't understand what your rights are. I'm then going to talk about negotiating your session, which really goes along with the first point, and then talk about some of the more legal aspects. What is a model release? If you've done a shoot with a photographer, you've probably been asked to sign a release. Well, why did you do that? What protections do you have in it? And what, if anything, can you do about it if the photographer goes outside of your understanding of what was going to happen? And then lastly, I'm going to talk about copyrights and the usage of images, the licensing of images, who owns what, and what your rights as a model are. And then a couple of things, just a kind of a preview of coming attractions, talk about the business versus hobby and what are you trying to accomplish out of your modeling so that you decide whether listening to additional tutorials I'm going to bring online is worth your time. Hopefully it is. I'm going to say here before we get into this next part, it really helps me if you like the content that I'm providing for you to like the individual YouTube videos. And the second thing is, if you can subscribe to my channel, then you will see those pop up on your YouTube settings when I publish new content. Right now, during the coronavirus shutdown, I'm trying to do something about every day, but certainly that'll slow down a bit once we all get back to business. All right, let's talk about your personal safety. The first thing I would say to models is research your photographers. You need to understand that just like there are models at every level of competence and experience, so are there photographers. Everybody's a photographer today. I teach other classes on improving your photography. In the last couple of years, I've included an entire section on iPhone photography, because the reality is that everybody who has ever gone to a Best Buy or picked up a phone at a Sprint store thinks that they're a photographer. That doesn't mean that they're the right photographer to help you build your portfolio. And so just because somebody says on social media, hey, I'm a photographer, there's a few basic things you can do to make sure that you're working with the right people. Number one, do they have a social media or website? Are they just on Facebook as Joe Smith and they list photography as a hobby? Well, maybe that's all you need to get started. Maybe all you're looking for is somebody to take some pictures so that you can get comfortable in front of a camera. And that's fine. Brand new photographers and brand new models ought to think about working with each other because there aren't any great expectations. But if they tell you, oh, I'm a professional photographer, take a look at their work. If they are, they're going to have something out there that suggests that they do that. Doesn't have to be full-time. An awful lot of photographers have a full-time day job just like you models do. But it doesn't mean just because they don't have a studio or a price list out that they're not competent. So do a little research, see what's out there. If they have a website, do they have any reviews? And check out their sources. The second thing I'd say is look for personal recommendations. If you're on social media, if you're on Facebook or Instagram, you've either already got followers or you're following people. If you have a photographer reach out to you, go to their Instagram, take a look at some of the people they've photographed, and then send messages to those people who have been tagged in their images. That's one good way to ask. And I found in my experience, people will ask me, hey, what about this photographer? I know that people in the modeling area refer a lot of work to me. I'm not afraid of my social media rating. I've got Google reviews on my website. My Facebook studio page has about 150 five-star reviews. So look for something. It may not be that many. Maybe somebody's only got 3 reviews, but they say, oh my God, this was the best experience of my life. Well, follow up with them and see, make sure. Google can be your friend. If you go to Google, search for the name of the photographer who wants to work with you, there's going to be good and maybe bad that's going to pop up. If somebody has made a complaint about them on Yelp, if somebody has posted, even if they're not your friend, some information on, say, Facebook saying, oh, I never got pictures back from this guy, don't work with him, or he or she was kind of creepy, that's important information for you to get. Now, I said before, you don't necessarily have to work with a professional, but you ought to be able to know the difference between a GWC, what we refer to as a guy or a gal with a camera, as opposed to a photographer. I mean, you can own pots and pans at home. That doesn't make you a chef. So do the people who are reaching out to you or you're reaching out to set up a photo shoot going to provide you the kind of work to make your portfolio look better and further your modeling career? So here, let's talk about personal safety. I mean, I've heard these stories from many models. I've got photos of 2 or 3 models on the walls of my studio who have told me at one time or another that they were either made uncomfortable by or actually assaulted by a photographer that they'd done work with. One person in particular told me that it was serious and they had given up the idea of doing any further modeling until a couple of people suggested they come and work with me. And now I'm one of her favorite photographers. She's representing a clothing brand and a retail location, so she's gotten over that bad experience. But you don't want to get in a situation where you're in some guy's mom's basement, 3 pictures in, and they say, that was great, now let's try it without the clothes on. Unless that's what you want to do, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. If your limits are anything goes, great. Just be upfront about it. If you tell the photographer right away, I'm up for headshots, I'm up for beauty, I want to do fashion, I want to do lifestyle, and you stop at that point, then that's what the limit should be. If they say, well, if I'm going to do a TFP, a trade for photo shoot with you, and I'm not getting paid as a photographer, then I expect you to do swimsuit or lingerie or topless or some other form of implied. If you don't do that, if you're not comfortable doing that, say it up front. The key here is to set your expectations so that nobody gets surprised, neither you nor your photographer. Another thing about that, bring somebody with you. If you've never worked with a photographer, bring somebody with you. You wouldn't think about going to many places alone. Why is it that photographers say, no, you can't bring somebody with you? Very seldom, unless it's a closed set commercial shoot, should photographers have any problem with you bringing somebody along. In my years of experience in my studio, I've only had people be disruptive a couple of times. And in both situations, I talked to the model and they took care of it. If you run into a photographer who says, absolutely under no circumstances can you bring somebody, I don't want the distraction, I want to shoot with you alone, that's a red flag. Follow your instinct. Find somebody else if they won't change their mind. Last point here, don't let the photographer, once you have established limits, push you beyond that. There are a number of model safety groups out on Facebook. I belong to a number of them. I was the first male member, I think, of the one I belonged to, but they've since added some other people. And what they do is they call out photographers who've made them feel uncomfortable. Oh, we shot outside and he wanted me to change in front of him. Oh, we shot in his basement, but he kept asking me if I would be comfortable doing something, with fewer clothes on. Oh, he wanted some behind the scenes video of me while I was changing. Whatever those things are, if they aren't within the limits that you've set, stop. It's okay to say no, and it's okay to leave. So how do you get those things set? So a lot of models are comfortable with the idea of signing a release when you do the shoot. Sometimes photographers want you to sign it beforehand. Sometimes they want you to sign it at the end, and I'll talk about what's covered in a release. But it's a little too late after you've already shown up to set those limits, so negotiate it up front. I'm not talking about you have to have a signed contract, but obviously that would be great. How did the photographer reach out to you? Did they email you? Did they text you on your cell number, or did they send you messages through Facebook Messenger or the Instagram messaging? However they reached out to you, tell them up front, hey, I'm willing to set up 2 hours of time for this shoot. Or ask them, if you're not sure, how long do you want to shoot? What day are we going to shoot? Where are we going to meet? If it's going to be a public space, then find somebody to come with you, and they don't need to be right in the way. They can follow you around. If it's going to be in a studio or a private location like somebody's home, then ask for information about it. Make sure up front you find out whether it's trade or paid. I've heard stories from models who thought they were doing a trade shoot, and then the photographer wanted to get paid. I get paid for most of my work. I insist on it. I do a limited amount of trade work. I make it very clear up front what my rates are and the conditions under which I might do a trade. The photographer assumes you're going to do it for free unless you say something to the contrary. So if you expect to get paid for your time, paid for your hair and makeup, paid something for putting yourself out there as their model to help them build a portfolio, then say it up front. Don't be ridiculous about it. We'll talk about pricing and ranges of fees and what should or shouldn't be included in that on a later video. How many images are you going to get? This is a huge one. Models walk into shoots, and photographers, you need to be careful about this too. You walk into a shoot, great. Would you like to shoot with me? Yeah, that'd be awesome. What do you want to do? Oh, I want to shoot some fashion and lifestyle. That's great. Then you show up with a photographer. They spend 3 or 4 hours instead of the 1 or 2 you thought. They take hundreds and hundreds of images, and then you never get them back. Why? Well, in some cases, you might have been shooting with an inexperienced photographer who was taking hundreds of photos, hoping that they could get 2 or 3 good ones. I've heard as well stories where the photographer didn't talk about what they would deliver, asked the model to do something they were uncomfortable with. Would you do topless for me? No, I'm not comfortable doing that. And then, well, then I'm not going to give you any photos. That's why you need to do this up front. It's like any situation in business. If somebody asked you if you would paint their house, wouldn't you want to know the price up front? Wouldn't you want to know when they want to have it done? Those are simple questions. Put them in writing. Even if it's done messaging, you can save the messages. I want to get 10 files minimum back from this shoot. Oh, okay, then we'll probably shoot for 2 hours and I'll make sure I get you 10. Are they going to be edited? Oh yeah, they'll be edited. What's your time frame for getting them back? If the photographer says 10 days, then expect it in 10 days. If they say, I don't know, this is a trade shoot, I have other work to do, I have a full-time job, I'll get them to you when I get them to you, set something. How about 30 days? Can you get them back to me in a month? Oh yeah, no problem. Now you've got a written record of the expectations of both of the parties, and it'll make it a lot easier when you do get to that shoot. So now let's talk about the actual shoot, okay? I mentioned that most people only have releases, they don't have contracts. I'm putting together a number of sample forms, and I'm going to have them available through my website and also on my YouTube channel. Model release can be very long and tedious, or it can be very short. I tend to use a short one. Here's why. That release protects the photographer. It doesn't protect the model unless you add language to it. Generally, a release will say that you, as the model, are of legal age. That's an important one. Talk about that again in a second. That you understand the photographer owns all of the rights to the images, and that the photographer can do anything they want with those images. That includes the right to sell or publish them. So if you're going to do implied or risque work, understand that unless you carve that out, when you sign a release, that person can put those images on Pornhub. They can sell subscribers to their OnlyFans or Patreon site. They can sell 8x10 prints to the general public of you. So if you're not scared yet, you should be at least thinking about it. All right, so let's go back to the under 18. I won't shoot anybody under 18 without a parent or guardian. Not a friend, not an aunt, not oh, she's old enough to drive. I don't want to be in that situation in my studio, number one, because legally they don't have the right to sign that release. They're not a legal adult. Number two, it's an issue of safety. And number three, it's a question of reputation. I don't need somebody who is maybe just going to take pictures in a dress or a sweater, then go into the changing area or the bathroom and end up taking selfies with just a bra on when they're 16 or 17 years old. That isn't appropriate for my studio. I don't allow people to take those kind of photos, although they still do because I don't have cameras back in that area. But I make it very clear, no, you can't do that. So I won't let a 16 or 17-year-old model come to my studio and shoot with me. I won't even do it outside. All right, so you're scared about the question of the photographer owning all your images and maybe selling them online. If you don't sign that release, since they've already taken the pictures, the law says that the person creating a piece of art owns it and owns the copyright. That's the legal term for the right to own, control, and sell, whether it be a piece of music, an oil painting, or a photograph. That's why I suggest that you make sure you take care of this before you get there, because the only thing that's probably going to happen if you don't sign a release is the photographer's going to say, well, you just wasted your time. You don't get any photos. That's not what you came into it for. That certainly didn't meet your expectation, and it doesn't leave you with any recourse other than to write a bad review about that photographer. So what does copyright mean? There is a copyright office. The U.S. government controls it. If you register copyrights, copyrighted materials, art, photos, lyrics to a song, whatever, then you've put the public on notice by registering it that it's yours. So if somebody writes a song, performs it in a bar, and then some other maybe signed artist says that's a great song and uses the lyrics and uses the music and registers it, according to the U.S. Copyright Office, the first person to register has the statutory rights. Now, you may still have rights if it was your song and you can prove that it was yours ahead of time, but I'm not getting into that for photos. Photos are pretty clear. That's a picture of you. If the photographer has it in their possession and they have the original RAW file or JPEG or whatever on their camera or on their computer, there's really no dispute that it's theirs. You don't have the right to use that photo without their permission. The typical release will say that the model is entitled to use images supplied by the photographer for their own personal use, their portfolio, or for social media. That doesn't mean that you can add filters to them, that you can recrop them because maybe you don't like your legs and you turn it into a headshot. You've altered that photo. That wasn't your photo. When the photographer sends you pictures, all they're giving you is the right to use them. You don't have the right to sell the images unless it's stated in your release. So if you've got an OnlyFans or Patreon site or Snapchat Premium or whatever you've got out there, and you think that you can sell the photos that were taken of you by another photographer, you can't. You're violating the law. You can't submit to a magazine. Oh, this was great. You know what? I'm just going to change my dress from the yellow to blue because I think blue will be prettier, and I'm going to submit it to this magazine. Violation of the copyright. You can't do it. Does it happen? Yes. Are there unscrupulous magazines, especially the online magazines, that will go ahead and publish it because they assume you had permission? Yes. I've called out some. I've sent cease and desist orders to one in particular, and they're no longer in business. Do it once, it might be a mistake. Do it 2 or 3 times, then you've got a major problem. What if your photographer puts a watermark or logo? Now, if they're a good photographer, it's not going to be smattered across your face, but they may have a tasteful logo at the bottom corner, and you say, well, I don't really want that. I want clean photos. If you did a trade and you didn't specify that you want unwatermarked images, you're not going to get them. If that watermark is on the image when it's delivered to you, whether it's a print or digital, you cannot remove it without violating the law. Now, that being said, and we're going to go into some of these areas in a lot more detail. I'm trying to give you an overview today. Everything is up for negotiation. If that photographer's starting out and they just want to shoot with a live human being and you come in and say, I want $50 an hour, I'm not going to do anything beyond fashion or lifestyle. No, I'm not doing lingerie. No, I'm not doing swimsuit. And I need 10 images back in 2 weeks. And if that photographer's hungry enough to work with you, they're going to do it. They're going to agree to it. You lose bargaining power the higher up the food chain toward professional full-time photographers you go. But on the other end, if you're an experienced model and you've been doing this a while and you've got a body of work, but you're willing to work with a beginner or a hobbyist photographer who's trying to hone their skill or add people, maybe they've shot only children, they want to start shooting adults. You've got relative bargaining power here. Use it to your advantage. And again, on the other side, the photographers, you need to understand that just because you own a camera doesn't mean that you can expect your models to do anything you want or wait forever to get their photos back. So here's a couple of general business tips, and then this is going to be the end of today's video. Remember what I said, if you found anything useful here, I'd appreciate it if you'd go and like this YouTube. I'm boiling all this down into 10 or 15 minutes today, but really each of these areas could merit their own and will end up meriting their own tutorial in the future. So a couple of business tips and strategies. If you want to be a model, act like a model. Act like you know what you're doing. Get business cards. Number one, it gives you an opportunity to give out your social media information and your contact info to potential photographers who might work with you. If you go to a fashion show, even if you're not a professional model and somebody wants you to walk in their fashion show, there's going to be other photographers there. There's going to be designers there. There may be makeup artists there. Just as the same as if you were selling real estate or selling cosmetics or whatever else. Have a business card. Act like you know what you're doing. It sets you apart from everybody else. Hand them out. Have a good image on one side, and we'll talk about getting comp cards and business cards and whatever in a separate tutorial with examples. Have a model comp card made to promote yourself. Now, the caveat here is you have to have enough good pictures that it adequately represents what you're doing, but again, that's a separate exercise. On social media, you shouldn't mix your modeling with your family photos. If you've got a couple of little kids at home, if you like to cook and post photos of your meals, that's great. That's what it's for. That's why there's 1 billion pictures a day being posted on social media. But if you want to be taken serious as a model, then have a modeling page. That way you can direct them with your business card or your comp card to go look at that page and stay out of your personal life. And secondly, you don't have to friend them and allow them access to all of your personal life. I'd suggest doing that on both Facebook and Instagram as a start. Consider a website. The website allows you to have more information available, a variety of portfolio. Maybe you've got a genre that is just fashion and a genre that is just beauty and a genre that is swimsuit. And you want to separate those out, but you want to provide some contact information, some context, and this is a perfect place to be able to put expectations, pricing, booking criteria, and all of that in one place. So that if you put your website on your business card, give your card to somebody, and then you end up in a shoot and they say, oh, I didn't know you did that. Well, did you look at my website? All right. A general caveat, unless you're doing this strictly as a hobby, always think about who's going to see your images. I was a corporate exec before. I got resumes all the time. It became standard the last few years before I left to do this full time. It became standard when somebody applied for a job for us to search them, or for the human resources department, to search for them on social media. Do you really want pictures out there posted on your page of you smoking a blunt or holding a gun or saying whatever shit you're saying in a video if the world's going to see it? So assume the world's going to see everything you do, especially when you're doing photography shoots. Your photographer's the one controlling that access. So if you don't want it to be out in the world, then you better set the expectations up front, or just don't do it. If you do want to do risque, you want to do alt modeling, you love shibari, you want somebody to photograph your tattoos no matter where they are on your body, awesome. Think about a pseudonym. Do you really want somebody to be able to track back from your modeling page and find your personal page and have your children, your family, and your personal friends from church or work exposed to that? Anyway, all right, this is a lot of information. I pumped it out here in a relatively short period of time. I hope you all have a great day. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I am all over social media. You can email me at jerry@altimagery.com. You can find my personal page, which is open to most models, on Facebook. or you can go to my Facebook studio page or my Instagram studio page and send me messages that way. All right, everybody, have a wonderful day.